In today's first episode of GP Red Presents, I'm really providing an overview of topics that I'm going to talk about more in the future. Today I want to just kind of cover quick overviews of things like what Parks and Recreation really means and how do we operate as a system within our communities. I also want to talk about past and current management aspects along with what it really means to be a leader. Hello, I am Dr. Teresa Penbrook, and I am here today to provide episode number 1 of GP Red Presents. For those of you who don't know me, I am the CEO and founder of Greenplay, which is a management consulting firm that works with parks, recreation, open space, and related agencies around the U.S., and we also do a little bit of work internationally. To start with, I kind of want to set the stage today to think about what is the purpose or value of parks, recreation, and or leisure services. And so there's a lot of different words there, but the idea is that we want to figure out why are we important? Why are we essential in our communities? Because I don't think that we have actually done a great job in conveying that to our decision makers or to the public as a field and a discipline. So hopefully going forward, some of these topics will be helpful as you start to speak the language with your decision makers or your friends or colleagues or whoever it is that you're talking to about why what we do is so important. Language is incredibly important, and throughout the United States, we typically use the term parks and recreation. So as you hear us talk going forward, we'll talk a lot about P&R or parks and recreation. The idea that usually, typically in the United States, most of the time, those assets and programs and services that are managed around this whole quality of life arena are parks and recreation. Also related services. In some communities, parks and recreation departments manage libraries. Some communities, they manage airports. Some communities, they manage medians or streetscapes or various transportation or public work assets. And so this whole idea of what the world of parks and recreation is kind of nebulous, and it depends on which community you're living in. And then there's this whole concept. At an international level, I'm part of a group called the World Leisure Organization. And so internationally, what we do in parks and recreation in the United States is called leisure management. And so we don't use that word a whole lot in the US because I think it's kind of come out of our good productivity genes. We want leisure has kind of become associated with sometimes, perceived as lazy or not a positive thing that we need to strive for. However, we're becoming more and more aware of how important leisure time is for everyone. So leisure basically just means free time. It's those activities that take place outside of the time that you need to work, sleep, eat, provide, gather, all of those things that you need to do to live on a daily basis, your subsistence activities, to have your shelter. And so it's really that time outside of that. And that's the time that we typically have available for enjoyment. And there are more increased opportunities for leisure now because we've been able to work towards having technology and various machines help us have more free time. We don't have to spend as much time on, for example, cooking and make food, that sort of thing. But it also gives us time to practice our passion, our art, the things that draw us, bring us joy and create creativity, also time to move our body, and all the other things that are important for us. And so at GP Red, we've kind of started to use the phrase recreation rather than recreation, recreation of body, mind, and spirit. And the whole idea that quality of life in our communities is governed by how many opportunities people have within our communities to, whether it's programs, sports, any type of access to nature, getting outdoors, all of the wonderful things that we choose to do when we have time to actually, and freedom to actually get out and do something that's meaningful for us. A lot of communities, this includes arts and culture. And so this is not about trying to define exactly what quality of life means to someone, but it's about how do we manage it in our communities in such a way that everyone has access to the things that are most meaningful for them. Often we say that, in professional parks and recreation administration and management, we work so that others can recreate their own bodies, minds, and spirits. As we talk through GP Red Presents in the coming months, what we're going to do is focus on public agency administration because that's where most of our mindset is and that's where most of us work. However, we will often mention private sector businesses or people who are offering like fitness clubs. We have a lot of golf courses. We have a lot of other private sectors folks who are offering things also in the leisure realm or in the quality of life realm. And so we want to acknowledge how we fit within that. How do we use our public tax dollars, if we're in public parks and recreation, to supplement and not compete with the private sector? Also, nonprofit organizations are very important, especially in the realms of human services and things like after-school care, Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs. There's a whole gamut of nonprofit organizations that kind of work in and around what we do in public parks and recreation. So at GP Red, what we're trying to do is provide the information and teaching for the Parks and Recreation professionals, but also the associations. Almost every state has a Parks and Recreation association that is for their members within that state. There's also the National Recreation and Parks Association. There's a whole lot of universities teaching in this realm, and then just a variety of different organizations that are kind of ancillary or around the outside. So what GP Red is trying to do is to fill those gaps in between all of those different areas. We really want to help you improve awareness of the scope and the services and the funding needs and how you actually deliver the services and the programs and the land management for your community quality of life. And so we want to kind of tackle that on a way that is meaningful and also timely, and we want to be responsive to what you want to talk about. We're going to spend some time talking about the concepts of how to look at a community at a system level, I mentioned that earlier, but also the difference between site level and system management and system planning. In a community, every community around the country, and depending on how you geographically define that community, there are a lot of different sites. For example, different parks or different recreation centers or different trails have site components. And so the idea that we have all these different sites, that those sites need to be well planned, and that's a site planning aspect. And then there's a whole system level plan that as you move up in administration, you really end up managing the whole system and trying to make sure that they work well together. And we are trying to allocate humans, people, our resources, to help manage all of the different assets that we have, along with all the different programs and services that we provide. We're also doing that at a variety of different levels within an organization. We have entry-level employees who are often the frontline folks who are the doers. They're out there instructing, they're running parks, they're operating centers, and they're working as programs and coordinators. So they're really the frontline folks. Sometimes they're doing the maintenance level, whatever that is, the doing folks. And then we often have this mid-level management, which is we refer to as kind of a supervisory level, where they are maybe managing a team or a division or a program area. And so this is supervisory level, is mid-level. And then also senior leadership, where we get into the folks who are managing the system overall. And this might be at the executive level of an organization or the assistant director, director level, and also the decision makers, those board and council people that I spoke about earlier, are really looking at it from that level. The purpose of the GP Red Presents channel is to really hit at all those different levels and help everyone at each level understand how they work together. I want to talk a little bit today about the past and current management aspects. And I have a master's degree in organizational management. I have an undergraduate degree in kinesiology, and I was a full-time Parks and Recreation fitness and wellness coordinator for several years and a personal trainer. So I come at it from that front line aspect of how do we help people. But I also, as I moved up through the ranks and became a manager, I wanted to learn how the organizationals worked. I have my PhD in Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management from North Carolina State University. And so in bringing this all together, I want to help you talk about and think about how we can, what our assumptions are and where we're coming from, and also to help increase your awareness. So in the past, there's a couple different paradigms here. In the past, for managing an organization or an agency, management was really about managing the business or the number of products produced or the number of things produced. And now management is really a distinguishable function that across all organizations. And so if you have a degree in management, you often are qualified to manage people of all different types of organizations rather than just one aspect of an organization. In the past, there was a concept that there is and must be one right type of organization. And if you look at the management books back from the 50s and 60s and 70s, it was how to manage an organization. And now we know that the best method that works in one situation doesn't always work in all situations. And so often, I joke that I was going to call my dissertation, "It Depends." The one thing that we know after all this time is that every community is somewhat different. And so we often talk about community-specific information. So wherever you are and wherever you live, the things that you need in your community to address these types of things is going to be different than somebody down the road, across in another state, across the United States. So really have to look at the methods and the strategies that work in your situation. In the past, there's also just one way to manage people. We had very strict human resources guidelines, and now we know that we don't actually manage people. What we want to do is we want to lead them. We want to empower them, and we want to help maximize the strengths. Depending on who ends up being part of our organization, we want to really be able to leverage those resources in a way that helps our organization grow. In the past, we talked about managers under certain names. Like, managers were people who were the boss, or they oversaw, or they controlled, or they were an authority figure, kind of the enforcer, the punisher. The old movies you've seen where, the boss was there with the whip and that sort of thing. We've really moved outside of that paradigm to this leadership paradigm, where most of the time in an organization, as you move up through the ranks, you become much more of a cheerleader and a coach and an encourager and a facilitator, that you are really helping the people produce the best thing that they can possibly do for the good of the whole. And so this really humanizes all of the aspects that we do, and it also really requires much deeper levels of communication, because we have to be a role model. We have to be constantly thinking about how people are perceiving things and what the expectations might be. There was a big paradigm shift in the 21st century. Here, what we're seeing is that things are moving so much faster right now. As we record this first video, we're really in the middle of COVID-19. And given the current circumstances, everybody is quickly adjusting to working remotely. A lot of our facilities are closed. We don't honestly know what the next new normal is going to be coming in the coming months. And so things are moving very, very fast. Beliefs and values have changed. Technology has changed, and so we have to constantly upgrade and be ready to take on new things. And we'll talk more about technology in one of our coming videos that's coming up. We also want to make sure that we're incredibly flexible and customer focused, and that we are really constantly able to adapt and be just very, very nimble to be successful. We want to talk about what it takes to be a leader. And so the idea of being visionary, being agile, being able to work collaboratively, and talk about what types of tools can help you do that. Right now, everyone's adjusting to this working remotely, working from home. And so the whole technology has just completely changed in the last couple of weeks. And that will change again as people start to go back into their centers and their offices. As hopefully as we get through this pandemic, we'll have an entirely different type of culture that we'll need to be looking at. We also know that people are really much more independent in thought and action. And so instead of just having this group of people that we manage, we now have to take into account the individual folks and the structures, whether it's hierarchical or horizontal, how we can be responsive and how we can be entrepreneurial. The entrepreneurial piece is public sector provision of parks and recreation is a business. It's a governmental business. And so it's not the same, though, as a private sector or a nonprofit business. And so if someone says, hey, you need to operate more like a business, we want to talk about what that really means and what's really fair in our community, given the fact that we're not only trying to make a profit, we're also trying to take care of people of all different backgrounds. And that's our job, is to balance all those types of things. I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about how the models of management have changed. And so, we know that the agricultural era was about 10,000 years ago. It started where people were learning how to grow things. And then the industrial era, where people were learning how to make things and build steam engines and that sort of thing. And that really hit about the 1760s into the 1800s. Then we had the technological era that started, depending on who you read or who you talk to, in the 1940s and 1970s, where we started to see, especially computers, when they came in the 70s, it completely transformed how we do our work. A lot of folks believe that we're now in what they call a conceptual era, the idea of thought and then creativity and right brain skills that are much more interpersonal in nature. And so to be a good provider of services or a good leader in a community, how do we manage all those different skills that we didn't have to do before? Along with this idea of synthesizing all of this. So at RED, we are constantly trying to synthesize what's coming out of different realms and try and figure out how can we apply that to the practice of improving quality of life through parks and recreation in our communities. This really does change how we manage things, and so we have to spend a lot of time looking at how we manage our customers, our partners. A lot of different partners that we'll spend time talking about partnerships with schools, partnerships with libraries, partnerships with nonprofit and for-profit businesses, our competitors, and then also the expectations that are constantly changing. How do we grasp, how do we take advantage of those? We're going to talk about the concepts of servant leadership and the idea that a servant leader focuses primarily on the growth and well-being of people in their communities. And so the servant leader is always about the idea that they are serving, beginning first with the natural feeling that we want to serve and we want to be there rather than trying to gain power. We are sharing power and we want to put the needs of others first. And so some of those concepts and how we weave those into parks and recreation agencies and administration and management are going to come up. We're going to talk about helping you think through who is the best boss you ever had and why, and how you can develop your own skills. And even if you don't want to move into a leadership position in your organization, how you can connect by managing up as a concept we'll discuss, or also how you can learn to create your ideas and package your ideas to get what you need to help you do the job that you want to do. We also want to talk about measurement and evaluation and why that's so important. If you can't measure results, it's difficult to know whether or not you're expending your resources effectively and efficiently. And if you can't demonstrate what you're doing, it's really, really hard to gather support from your decision makers and from the public. And so we're going to talk about different ways to do that that might be easier and helpful. Some of our other future topics will include, I know we're going to right away work on working remotely and how you can best incorporate that into your life. Planning and trends. Obviously, I'm a planning geek and a researcher, so we're going to talk about some of that, but it's not going to be only me. I have lots of different topic experts lined up in the coming months, and so I'll be bringing people in to share their viewpoints about how they do it. We're going to talk about service provision, programming, history, some theory. Covered a little bit of history today, but also kind of the evolution of why we did that. And then cost recovery, access to nature, and really we want to get to what you need. And so the bottom line is we want you to email us. We want you to provide in the comments what you need to see, and also contact us at any time with suggestions. And if you're a topic expert and you really want to share your ideas, I would love to do an interview with you and record that and get that out through our channel. So there's a whole variety of different things out there. I just want to welcome you to GP Red Presents, and we welcome your help in trying to help us get this channel off the ground and create something that's really meaningful and helpful for all of you.